Welcome along to the Make It Count podcast. My name is David.
My name's Matt.
And we are the Taylor Bros.
Taylor Bros.
Every time. It's going to come out real quiet. You're going to have to boost that a little bit.
No, we're going to leave that quiet.
Right.
So this week we don't have a book review. We have a genre review.
Yeah, which genre did you pick? I don't think
Fiction.
That's not a genre, is it?
What is a meta genre? What is that? It's a whole subset.
That is the category, fiction and non-fiction.
Yeah.
There aren't other categories, are there?
Yeah, so but that category.
So we're talking about fiction.
We are.
Why are we talking about fiction?
Because it's all made up, isn't it?
If you just want to make up something in this episode.
So, a little while ago we were looking at the Tolkien quote on fantasy and escape and how that's not necessarily a bad thing. And in the interim after that, I did a bit of reading around fiction and the benefits of fiction, because from my sort of natural leaning, I think certainly from when I was at university, was kind of, oh yeah, reading is this really good thing for improving yourself, gaining knowledge, and I kind of looked down a little bit on fiction. I always enjoyed fiction. I remember our parents read to us when we were kids, like Narnia series and stuff like that. But I think I got into this mindset of, people that just read fiction, it's a bit like, it's not real reading, is it? And it's like that self-help literature, that non-fiction.
And so now we're looking at all the benefits of reading, to help you in a different way, indirectly.
Well, so I looked a little bit into it, and it turns out, because I'd heard sort of anecdotally, reading fiction makes you more empathetic. I was like, well, is it the case? And so I read around a little bit, basically just read some interesting articles, and turns out there are some real world benefits to reading fiction.
Wow. What are they, Matt?
Diving straight in. I liked the title of the BBC article that I read, which it was just like, it was classic nowadays, every article title, if it's not like political, like let's make it's like the question mark. So the question was, does reading fiction make you a better person?
And as we can all agree, yes. And no, because it makes you proud.
Yeah, exactly.
You're better than other people for reading more.
If you've read this article, you're now not a better person anymore because you're proud about being better.
Yeah.
Ultimately,
that's not what the article said?
No, it's not.
Okay.
They were looking at, does it actually improve your empathy? And not just does it, is where's the causality? Is it that maybe people that are just more empathetic like to read stories?
Mm-hmm.
And effectively, they've done some of these sort of double-blind studies where they go, no, actually, they were able to identify the reading of the story, and then the amount to which someone got engaged in that then correlated with their likelihood to help when the researcher accidentally dropped a bunch of pens on the floor or something like that. Those sort of things. Very contrived in the study, but they actually were able to measure a marked increase in the sensitivity to others and the likelihood to actually help. So yeah, it's really interesting.
That is interesting. That idea of empathy, it kind of makes sense. If empathy is being able to think like another person or feel with another person, then the idea of reading a fictional story from the perspective of another person does make sense.
Yes.
You sort of wonder, how long does that last? How much can we ever measure that? But that's just things for all research in some ways.
For sure.
And
unless you're going to go, we're going to sign up a whole load of people to a longitudinal study where you go, these people are never allowed to read any fiction and these people read loads. You're not going to get those. And then
you'd have to control for a whole number of other things as well. So, but also, I think what you're not also suggesting is that the only way you improve your empathy is through reading. It's one of the benefits. Any other benefits stand out to you?
Well, one of the things that was interesting that they, this one researcher or psychologist based in Canada kind of implied was that reading fiction is almost like a flight simulator for the mind, for interpersonal relationships. It gives you lived experience, seeing things from other people's points of view, as a story unfolds, as lives unfold. So it's like in the same way that a pilot can learn how to fly a plane without leaving the studio, you can actually learn how interrelationships work and those complexities without leaving the book, as it were. And so it's a really interesting analogy.
I suppose it depends what sort of thing you're reading. or how good the author is. But you're reading some horror stories that might affect you in some ways.
That is true. I opened this episode with a complete misnomer. This fiction is not a genre, but I didn't look at, like, I'm sure some people have done some research on the difference between different genres.
Yeah, I think something, I couldn't find this reference, but one of the things I understood was the empathy thing was strongest with like classic stuff, like more detailed, descriptive writing, because there was a perceived to be a greater depth there.
Interesting.
But anyway, carry on.
One of the things that they said that with reading fiction, you're forced to do is slow down as you process lots of information, but because it's fictional, you maintain this open-mindedness. So, for example, they were comparing, one of the studies compared people reading news articles and journalism to reading fictional stories. And they basically said, what we discovered is the people that read the fictional story ended up having that increased empathic response and everything. And they postulated, well, one of the reasons why is because they've suspended that disbelief. They're not judging whether the people in the story are accurate in what they're saying or are on the right side, because it's kind of like, well, I've put it into this space where it's happening in fiction. Whereas with news stories, we're always, are they aligned? Are we, we're verifying, or we're trying to cut down before we make judgments before we've allowed it to develop, basically.
I suppose that's maybe as well one of the differences between fiction and non-fiction is often when we're reading non-fiction, we're trying to get some information out of it. We're trying to extract something that maybe we can use or inform how we think about something. Whereas fiction is probably much more of an immersive experience. And you talked about slowing down. I think one of the things you mentioned was that idea of reading fiction really slows you down. It's one of the things that can kind of bring that steadiness. And I find that I read a lot. I read probably about 50-50 between fiction and non-fiction. Yeah. And when I read fiction, it does really slow me down, and I get into it, and I can, just enjoy getting into the story, as it were.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, a couple of the articles were literally just lists of the benefits. And one of them that finished with, ultimately, people that read fiction report that it helps them feel happier. They are satisfied with it. And they kind of showed this graph, that some longitudinal study that going like in 1992 and in 2002 and in 2012, the number of people, I think it was in the United States, that reported reading at least one fiction book for pleasure that year, and it stayed pretty constant around that 60-50% mark. And those that actually enjoyed it, and it's like, yeah. And so, like, even amidst the internet's grown up in that age, the smartphones and Netflix and everything, you still have roughly about 50% of people will pick up a book at some point in the year purely for the enjoyment of it and find it enjoyable.
Yeah, well, that's good. And maybe one of the reasons we feel happy, I've done some reading about writing. One of the things they say, if you write fiction, you got to put your main character through really difficult times. You got to make their life miserable, right, so that they can hopefully overcome it, right? And maybe that's why we enjoy it, because our lives are maybe not that miserable.
yeah. You're going, well, yeah. So I haven't had that bad.
I thought I had a bad life, but then I read about this guy, and even though it's fictional, that would suck, actually. Yeah.
I mean, in a sense, that is exactly one of the things that they say, reading these sort of things. And again, where does this come in? Is it just you learn it by doing it, or is it... But they were saying it can be an incredible stress reliever, reading, more so than going for a walk or taking a cuppa, having a cuppa, or even listening to music. And they said, like, within like 6 minutes of reading, all of these physiological, like heart rate and cortisol levels and everything, breathing slows down. And they reckon it's just because your brain literally can go into almost a meditative trance-like state. It's almost as good as meditation. And we've heard so much, in the last decade or more about the benefits of mindfulness and everything. There is almost an element of, obviously, it's that flow thing idea, isn't it? What's his name? Csikszentmihalyi or whatever.
Oh, Csikszentmihalyi.
Yeah, and that reading gets you into that flow state, because anyone that's read a great book and has got into it will know that feeling of, you kind of look up and you go, wow, what time is it? wow, like 2 hours went by or something, or
Yeah,
40 minutes, or I don't know what it was.
Yeah, it could be crazy. Like, there are times when you'll start reading, maybe like 8 or 9 p.m. and then you'll look up and you'll realize it's 3 a.m. and you're still reading this book 'cause it's so good. Yeah, that was me last night.
That was last night. So
yeah, so there you go.
We're not armchair readers.
I'm not sure that's a benefit, though. I'll be honest.
Well, that
finding
does
a book
counteract,
that you can.
Ironically, that counteracts one of the things that a lot of them said, which is that it can help you with sleep.
Yeah. Well, ultimately, I do always read before I go to bed, and undoubtedly, it's better than screens or loud noises.
Yes, for sure.
It's that, like you said, it goes into meditative state. But if you find a book that is just really good, then you are not gonna sleep.
Sometimes you have to. I actually discovered, because a lot of the fiction reading I do on my Kindle, because I don't want to have to buy loads of physical massive 900-page volumes. It is a benefit to read on Kindle, and I've found a way to basically just after midnight, the Kindle app knocks out for an hour or two. So basically, it forces me to be like, okay, put the book down now. Let's try and sleep. Which is, I've found, really beneficial. But then, if at 3 a.m. I wake up and I can't go to bed to sleep, I can read again.
That's very good.
So yeah,
that's great.
I'm not that dumb, guys.
So, I think that's interesting.
There's a whole load of things.
Obviously, ultimately, why do you read fiction? We read fiction because we like stories. We're storied people, right? Yeah. And it's something that we can immerse ourselves in. And there are other benefits as well. Like you said, the empathy, the slowing down and the calming down. And
reduce stress, reduce incidence of depression as well.
One of the reasons we talk about these things is because they seem quite prevalent at the moment. Yeah. And I think we live lives that lead to high stress, high anxiety moments. And actually having that toolkit of just going, hey, it's okay to read and it's good for me.
Yeah. So give your thumbs a rest from the doom scroll, pick up a book and do some page turning instead.
Hey, reading on your Kindle, you're undermining your benefits.
I know.